everyone, welcome to the Healthiest Voice podcast. I'm Christopher Mullen, your host and the founder of Healthiest Humans. Before we dive in, Healthiest Humans and the Healthiest Voice podcast series is independent of my professional role as a pharmacist at Metro Market. The views expressed are for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or professional advice. We recommend consulting a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions based on the information provided. As you know, Healthiest Humans are on a mission to help design the best health system in the world, which is the human body when it functions in its optimal state of being. Simply put, our vision is to democratize human health, and our mission is to empower humans. Today, we are diving into the art and science of longevity. What the world's healthiest people eat. Our special guest today is Jason Goodman. Jason is a Mayo Clinic certified wellness coach and national board certified health and wellness coach. As a nutritionist, an exercise physiologist, and holistic wellness professional, he helps people lose weight for good, prevent and reverse chronic diseases, and help people build lasting habits that boost well-being. With that, Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Christo.
Absolutely. Before we jump in, could you start by sharing what inspired you to pursue this career?
It's a good question. I'm gonna do my best to keep it brief. I'll give you the highlights. It started for me as an overweight teenager, and not having the resources I needed to navigate that well. That's what initially got me interested in nutrition and interested in exercise. And over some time, that evolved to seeing this huge need that many people understood that taking great care of themselves was important, but struggled to do so. And being a wellness coach is the perfect job for helping people with that.
All right, very well. So, for to frame the whole conversation, for our podcast, just so the listeners know, I have 4 questions here for Jason, and we can probably just dive in right away. And can you tell us, maybe, Jason, out of your experience, what patterns have you noticed in the diets of the longest lived populations, like those in the blue zones, and how they maybe differ from the typical Western eating habits here in the West?
To me, the thing that jumps out is the degree of processing. More than any other factor, the peoples you're referring to eat what I think of as real food, food that hasn't been processed at all, or maybe very, very, very minimally. I think of that as being important for 2 reasons. One, food that hasn't been messed with doesn't have harmful substances in it. More importantly, food that hasn't been messed with has a great deal of naturally occurring beneficial substances in it. I think that's a good starting point. I'm a big fan of keeping things simple and getting to the heart of the matter. And to me, that's what stands out.
Absolutely. So I think maybe for the audience to understand the difference between processed foods and ultra processed foods, can you maybe unpack that for us? Because obviously when you go and buy an apple and you chop up an apple, I mean, obviously it's processed, right?
Right.
I think, I mean, there's a classification for this, but maybe if you can unpack that, for the average Joe out there.
Yeah, I'm not into the technical classifications because I think they're unnecessarily complicated. I think this is something we sort of know it when we see it. Sometimes you'll hear people say, if it's food that your grandparents or great-grandparents would recognize, that probably qualifies as real food. I think keeping it simple and thinking about it that way. You'll also hear people say the food that is sold on the perimeter of a grocery store tends to be real food. Is there processing sometimes involved? Sure, there's some processing, for example, to cut up fruit. There's some processing, for example, to take nuts out of their shells. But that's a very different kind of processing than what happens when you say buy some food from a fast food restaurant and one item has 75 ingredients.
Yeah.
So I think it's as simple as sort of that common sense idea that something like the examples I shared that are minimally processed are generally the way to go. It's very important, as a wellness coach, I wear two hats. I wear a physiology hat and I wear a psychology hat. And if I only wore a physiology hat, the answer would, the recommendation would be to only eat real food. Putting my psychology hat on, we live in an environment where there's a wide range of food available to us, and people have wide ranges of upbringings and wide ranges of relationships with food. And you can have a mix of some real food and some junk food and do quite well. It's really up to each individual to determine what's a sustainable approach to that works well for them. I guess what I'm trying to say there is it's important not to turn any of this stuff into talk about it in terms that are too black and white, because that can lead to perfectionism, and that can lead to people not only not making progress, but not even getting started.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, in the end, as you say, I mean, we live in the real world. We can't be too black and white about this. And the way I approach that, and I think that's basically what you're saying is that what I do is Monday through Friday, I'm super strict. I only eat one line items like an apple, meat, cheese, and stuff that is not coming in boxes, and most of the time do not have barcodes.
Mm-hmm.
But then come the weekend, and we have birthdays, we have celebrations and stuff like that. Well, I mean, then with moderation, you indulge a little bit into and move over from the black and white to a little bit of a gray area, where I will eat some chocolate cake. I mean, my birthday is coming up, fairly soon here, and I know my daughter is going to make me a chocolate cake because it's my favorite dessert, and I will have some of it. So I'm not going to be too extreme about that. But I think the point is, in general, if we actually want to make something that's sustainable and make something that's real and that will actually, help people in the long term. It's just kind of focusing on maybe have a block where you say, what, in this block, Monday through Friday, or whatever works for you, what I'm saying, maybe just breakfast or just one of the meals, what I'm saying, just focus specifically, just start with one meal instead of, just having whatever is served in terms of, like you say, going to a restaurant and whatnot, to just start paying attention, have an awareness of what you're actually putting into your system. So that's how my journey started too. But I just want to tag on to that. That's how I approach that. The black and white versus the gray.
And what you say is very interesting, because in the world, the worlds many of us grew up in, meaning our immediate families and neighborhoods, junk food was ubiquitous. So it can seem as though junk food is the norm. And then starting to eat more real food can seem like this extreme thing, right? But that's sort of upside down, essentially, because we've evolved. We're were wired for eating real food. So I truly think, and I do, with the rarest of social exceptions where I won't have the highest quality food. Over a number of years, I've gotten to the point where that's my natural, that's my normal. It's no sacrifice, it's no struggle. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. That said, in working with clients, I see that they usually follow a progression. A good example might be sometimes when I start with a new client, we do an audit of their initial eating habits. And one way we'll quantify it is proportion of real food and proportion of junk food. And a person might be starting at something like 25-75. And over a number of months, it's something we can continually measure. So they might evolve to 45-55, and by after 6 months, they might have flipped from 25-75 to 75-25, or maybe even 85-15, or maybe even 95-5. Almost no one I know gets to 100-0. And without getting to 100-0, they do big things. They lose weight, they improve their metabolic biometrics, and subjectively they feel a whole lot better. So yeah, I think it's a neat, it's something to be playful with and to challenge oneself with. And but what's very interesting is what I'm sure you've experienced this and seen this in others is as you eat better, junk food loses its appeal. You sort of you become more sensitive, and the feeling lousy that comes with eating junk food becomes increasingly or becomes decreasingly acceptable. So it's a neat journey to witness a person making.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. So in that context, is there a common nutrition or food group that stands out across these longevity diets? For example, is it more fiber, plant, polyphenols, or lower animal protein intake that actually makes the difference for them? Kind of bringing that into your last question or your last answer here, basically of the 75-25 initial start after the audit. What's really making the difference? Are there any common nutrition or food groups that stands out for you?
In the blue zones, it's clear that those peoples are eating less animal food and more plant food. When we look at all of the available scientific evidence about nutrition, I don't think that's the key factor. I think the key factor is the degree of processing that we just talked about. I also think that it's interesting that, at least here in the United States, the thing that's first interpreted from the blue zones and most interpreted from the blue zones is food. My sense is it's other aspects of their lifestyle that are at least as important, if not more important, factors in their longevity and in their well-being.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying there, because we have this tendency to just focus on the food component, right? And you have the people on the one side, the carnivores, and all the way to the other side where it's everybody that just only eat plants. And first question, so on that, where do you see that plays out? I'm saying just the food, and then we can talk about all these add-on things that plays a role in the architecture of health too. What's your take on what's the healthiest diet? Personally, I think it's the Mediterranean diet. It's fairly balanced, and by the way, I think all diets work. It's more the adherence to these diets. But there's caveats and there's nuances to all that, because everybody is different, everybody's unique and whatnot. So what's your take on that, on this whole scale from the carnivores all the way to the people that only eat plants, you know?
Well, to add a little to the question, essentially, I think those are the two things that are there are two things that are most hotly debated.
Yeah.
How much plant food and how much animal food, and how much carbohydrate and how much fat. And over, now decades, many people fight over that over and over and over again. And I largely think it's a disservice to the public. I think it confuses the public. I think it gives people an excuse to say even the experts can't agree on the best way. So why bother? So I think much of that is shame. Another factor that I'll add, and I'm going to come back to you. Essentially, I'm going to agree with your idea that adherence is key, and that's part of me putting my psychology hat on again. And number two, we're different. Individuals are different, and a good example of this, or one important way to think about this, is latitude lines. So people with deep ancestry, say near the equator, have evolved differently in terms of both of those two questions, the plant food, animal food question, and the carbohydrate fat question. There's different food at the equator. There's different whole natural real food at the equator than there is in Northern Europe or Northern North America. And the big thing that changes as you get away from the equator, I'm talking hundreds, thousands of years before the modern technology that allows for the shipment of food all over the place, right? You had to eat the food that was where you are. As you move away from the equator, you couldn't only eat plant food. They didn't. The winters are too harsh and too long. And with an increase in animal food consumption comes an increase in fat consumption. So my sense is that we have different. It's not my sense. We do have different ancestries, and that affects things like one example, the digestive enzymes that we possess, or the digestive enzyme profile that each of us possesses. And in that light, I think two very smart people can be sitting across a table from each other, and one saying, if I have any meat or any animal food, I feel terrible. And the other person on the other side of the table can say, if I don't have any meat or any animal food, I feel terrible. And I think both of them can be telling the truth.
So much so, yeah.
So I think it's important that it's important to acknowledge that there probably isn't one best way for every person to eat. I'll pause there because I said a lot. I'll wrap up. I'll tie it in a bow by saying, if you're mostly eating real food, I don't think the other questions matter too much, and I think it's important to find where on that spectrum works well from you in terms of what leaves you feeling your very best, and that is also enjoyable to you, and therefore easier to adhere to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So moving away from the food, looking at the epigenetics and other factors, maybe we can touch on the top one or two or three factors that plays also into the equation of wellness, right? The architecture of wellness. You want to expand a little bit on that?
Well, people in the blue zones and people who are well anywhere and everywhere are also moving their bodies. And so we see that quite a bit in the blue zones. This is interesting to people. What we don't see is something that looks like exercise. We don't see gyms, we don't see CrossFit, we don't see triathlons. What we see is people moving their bodies as part of their daily lives. And so I think that's a very interesting thing to note. In general, we see living in harmony with nature. For example, going to sleep when it's dark and waking up when the sun comes up. So I think things like that are interesting. To me, the most interesting thing about the blue zones is how interdependent the people are, how interdependent the communities are, both from families to neighborhoods to the larger communities. There's a great deal of interdependence, and that seems to be a huge factor in their longevity and in their well-being.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, what practical tips or shifts would you recommend then for someone wanting to adopt a longevity-focused diet without completely overhauling their lifestyle? Maybe can you pinpoint, 3 or 4, whatever works for you?
Yeah, I come up with right away at least 2 ideas I think people will find helpful. One is I created a word, Nutritious. It's the combination of the word nutritious and delicious. And I think that goes a long way. People are often stuck thinking that eating better means giving up enjoyment, giving up deliciousness. And I think one of the best things a person can do is to explore what whole, natural, real foods they enjoy and how to make simple meals from whole, natural, real foods they enjoy. So they're not giving up enjoyment. They're gaining nutrition. They're gaining improved nutrition without sacrificing enjoyment. I think that's huge. And related to that is, if you're not already doing so, cook more. That's sort of a proxy for eating better. If you're cooking more, you're going to be eating better because you're making things from scratch. Most people don't have the kinds of intense preservatives that exist in junk food. Most people don't have them in their kitchens. So no matter what you're making, if you're cooking more, you're likely going to be eating better.
I really appreciate that. That's beautiful, actually. I like the word that you created there or designed. So when I started my journey, Jason, and kind of started retraining my palate, one of the things that I found was on this journey of exploration, where you start exploring different cultures, different foods, because as you know, because we're creatures of habit, we go to the grocery store, we buy the same foods, we make the same meals. Once you start stepping out of that and start looking at the lens and widen your lens to different, opportunities and options that's available to you, you start realizing how tasteful and delicious a peach are. A strawberry, if it's an organic strawberry, or you're just having a different sense and a smell for things, if you can actually retrain your palate off of all these added sugars, the stuff that we're kind of just bombarded by on an everyday basis. So I really appreciate that. And I mean, I cannot agree more on the cooking part. There is something to be said about when you actually start making your own food and gaining traction and getting involved in something versus something that we used to do. I mean, our grandparents and last 5,000 years people had, there was no other way. They had to prepare their own food. And, now with the dawn of the industrial age, all of a sudden we have these prepared meals. So we have lost that context. And yeah, so, coming back to the chocolate cake that my daughter is going to bake for us, it's different if she's making it for me and the way I perceive the whole experience versus going to the grocery store, get a cake, and that way around. So
Mm.
um, I really appreciate that. That's really beautiful. So my last question for you, talking about cultures, are there any surprising foods or cultural practices tied to longevity that people might not expect? I think you already talked about one that stood out for me was we have gyms in the Western world where everybody goes and they do their 45 minutes of cardio or strength training, and people in the blue zone simply don't have that. It's not even part of their language, right?
Right.
So anything else that we can learn from these cultural practices, that we can bring home and make part of our daily lifestyles?
I think the one you brought up is a surprise to a lot of people. I think that's neat. I mentioned relationships earlier, and I'm not gonna. I don't remember the details. I don't remember which specific blue zone this practice occurs in, and I don't remember the name of it. I think something like it exists in more than one blue zone, and what it is something like a group of people that go through life together. It's a group of friends, and I don't know at what age they uh, get started together, but these are people that are essentially friends for life. So they start at some young age, they're friends, and there's a commitment to maintaining that friendship through getting married, becoming parents, getting older, becoming grandparents, getting older. These there's a continuity to these groups, and I think that's a surprising practice to many people, and I think a very interesting one.
Well, I think that's essential. I mean, just from a pure design standpoint, the way we live right now, we get up in the morning and we're full of cortisol because that's how we start our days. Coffee run, speed, get to work and whatnot. And I think if we can just downregulate the cortisol for starters, and how do we do that? Is by this pure human connection, right? And so much more if it's a continuous long journey that you walk alongside someone. And personally, I actually experienced that because I lived in Africa for 30 years.
Wow.
And then obviously because of that, my entire network of people, my friends, my professional network, everything was there, right? And then I transplanted myself and my family over here and live here for the last 20 years now. But it's huge to the point I had to restart all my professional relationships, all my personal relationships on this side of the pond, right?
Mhm.
And I can tell you, it was a very, very stressful time. And to this day, I still struggle to kind of get back into that, how shall I put it? A better state of mind sometimes, because I do not have that network of people to just rely on, pick up the phone, because when I try to pick up the phone and call someone on the other side of the world, they're already in bed, or vice versa. So I think your point to this whole community setting is so valid. I want to highlight that. The second thing is not only that we have this weird concept of exercise, but it is a proven fact that people that exercise in a community setting, like playing tennis versus going on a treadmill, the people that do these racket sports, they live longer. And the reason why they live longer is because we not only get exercise, we actually drop the cortisol, right? So I truly appreciate that. Is there anything else that you want to add to that? to the
I
community?
just want to say, I think it's neat that you brought that up. It's neat that you know that. Not many people are aware of that scientific evidence that what we might call communal exercise seems to have a greater benefit than what we might call solo exercise. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I want to be respectful for your time. And can you tell us, where can people find you? Do you have social handles that you can leave with them?
On social media, if a person simply looks up my full name, Jason Gutman, they will find me easily. And the name of my business is Puvima, and my website address is simply puvima.com.
Jason, thank you so much. I'm grateful for your time and expertise today. We know that our listeners will walk away feeling inspired and informed. Thank you so much, and you have a blessed day.
You as well.
Thank you.